All right. Oops. Getting an echo. Let me pause that. Okay. So that's muted. Okay, I think we're good. Excuse me. So, there's not that much for me to cover anymore. We're kind of coming to an end here. So, I don't even know if we'll have the YouTube stream open the whole time. May switch over to Zoom if that proves more productive. Basically, we're done here. So, today's the last day that we meet, and I'm just here to answer your questions. Like, you kind of know what's up with the homework and that kind of stuff. So, any kind of questions there are about the project, feel free to talk to me. If you want to hop over into Zoom, might be easier to have then we can actually have a live conversation where we're talking to each other rather than trying to make sense of stuff in chat. But I would say, yeah, this is a good opportunity for you to come into Zoom and say, I'm not sure about this part of the project, and then let's talk about it. Or I'm not sure what I'm doing here. Here's what I did. Should I do something different? Any of those kinds of questions, that's basically what we're doing here today. And that's why I think here in a little bit, I kind of have the YouTube stream open for just to make sure that when people show up, there's something for them there to look at so they don't think that class is canceled or something like that. But the reality is the YouTube stream won't be as helpful today because you're probably asking me specific stuff about your project. Now, if your project is done and you're completed and you feel good about it, then I guess you're done, right? Because today's the last normal day of class. So we can look. Also, another thing to be careful about, remember, I have 3 statistics courses. So I've had a couple of students who were watching the wrong statistics course, and then they were thinking the wrong days for due dates and stuff like that because they were watching the wrong class. So the playlist should tell, you should be, like, the dates and times of the class are the title of the video. So if you're in a Monday, Wednesday class, or I guess in this case, a Tuesday, Thursday class, you shouldn't be watching statistics courses from my Monday, Wednesday class because that's the wrong class. You're going to get dates wrong and stuff like that because remember, my 3 statistics courses this semester, one is 18 weeks, one is 15 weeks, one is 5 weeks. So they all have different due dates for everything. And the ones that are shorter don't have final exams. So they actually had to turn in their project before. But I'm seeing some students who are watching, I guess they just go to the channel and watch whatever video is there. You want to make sure you match the date and time to the thing that you missed that you need to watch. Don't watch it for a different class, basically, right? But I've had some students getting confused about that, or a couple students. What was I going to say? If we look at the calendar, let's look at the final exam schedule because I can't remember off the top of my head when anything is due. Since I have the 3 statistics classes, everything's different. So we're what? Tuesday, Thursday at 8? So that should be, yeah, I think that's right. That's when that thing is due. The 14th at 10 a.m. So make sure you get it turned in by then. Now you might go, well, that's a long ways off, and it kind of is, except we won't be meeting anymore. So if you start having trouble, like if next week you start getting into your project and then realizing, oh, I have questions, it's harder to get a hold of me because we don't have these normal meeting times. So it's a little more complicated. So that's why the goal of today is for you to ask me any of these kinds of questions that you need cleared up about homework or, grades or turning in the project or anything like that. Now's the time to show up and ask. So I would encourage you, if you're someone who has a question, hop into Zoom and ask me the question so that I can, help you out understanding what it is that you need to get done on that part of the project so that you can get your full credit and hopefully pass, right? I would much rather have a lot of students passing this class than fewer students passing the class. So you don't, right? You want to pass the class. I want you to pass the class. So let's make that happen, right? So Yeah, I don't really have much to talk about. So it might, if no one's asking questions, we're just kind of all going to sit around here looking at each other. So anyone who wants to hop into Zoom and ask me a question, please do that. Or if you have a basic question, feel free to throw that into chat. But sometimes I'm getting questions, especially lately, where someone will put into chat like, "I'm confused about hypothesis tests." Well, it's not really a thing I can just answer in one or two lines, right? I mean, there's a whole, or even just talk about it. I mean, it was a whole chapter, hypothesis tests, and then there's your project. There's a lot going on there. So you'll want to be a little bit specific as far as that. Right. Okay. So I guess that's the amount of talking that I'll do. Anyone who wants to ask me a question or get some kind of guidance, now is the time to do that. What's going on? Here we go. Right. Okay. Let's do this. So, any questions? Feel free to ask them. Otherwise, it's going to be a quiet class meeting. Man, Canvas is running super slow this morning. Okay, here's a question. Let's talk about it. Does the video need to include visuals? The visuals for statistics is a pretty large portion of the class, so yeah, any video that doesn't include visuals is going to take a pretty big hit in grade form. Visuals are a really important part of statistics because they're part of being able to communicate your ideas, right? Statistics done for yourself are almost never helpful. The whole point is you're trying to learn some new thing, or you're trying to make a change at your company, or your boss wants to see a report or something. You have to communicate that statistics to people, and visuals are a great way to do it. So yeah, I mean, there's no there aren't specific rules about the project, but I mean, you should definitely have visuals. Just from a presentation standpoint, if you weren't showing visuals, what would you show? So it's bad from a statistics perspective. It's also bad from a presentation perspective. Both of those. So it's going to hurt you both of those. But absolutely, you should be talking about your questions. You should have the visuals in there. Some histograms and stuff like that in there that are relevant and done well. Remember, one of the big things when you show me your visuals, if they're not labeled well, you're automatically going to get deducted some points there. Make sure you label them well. Confidence intervals, hypothesis tests, all that kind of stuff. Most of the major chapters where we learn statistical content should show up in your project. Okay, now there are a few chapters where it doesn't make sense, like probability. The probability is baked into the rest of the class. So at that point, we don't really need, it's not like you need to cover specifically probability, but that chapter was to set us up to do the other ones. The binomial chapter may not make sense to do in your project. There's a couple in there that you don't necessarily have to cover, but you should absolutely be having visuals, confidence intervals, hypothesis tests, talking about your questions, talking about your topic, all that kind of stuff should. And I'm not saying just those things, right? But you definitely should have those in there. Okay, and thanks. It looks like a large number of you took that CSLO quiz, so good job. That's great. And it looks like most people got 3s on it, so good job. That's good. That's very good. Okay. All right. Other question? Oh, sorry. It looks like I was. Sorry, it looks like I was muted here in Zoom. So I was answering a question, but it looks like I was still muted. So the answer to the question, in case the person who asked that didn't hear my answer, yeah, you need visuals in your project. They need to be well labeled. That I would say that's a pretty major component of the project, is having those visuals to look at. Right. It's that necessary but not sufficient, meaning you kind of have to have visuals, confidence intervals, hypothesis test. I mean, those are kind of like the big 3 things to stand on, but that doesn't mean that that's the whole project. You know, it's like a chair. You have to have the legs. If you take one of the legs away, the chair falls over, but having legs isn't enough for the whole chair, right? So there's other parts of the chair that need to be included, but yeah, I would say the legs of the project are the visuals, your questions, hypothesis tests, confidence intervals, that kind of stuff. But you need more stuff in there as well. Let's see. I would throw in a lot of your summary stats as well. Talk about means, medians, standard deviations. That stuff should actually absolutely be in there. Correlation, pretty big concept. It makes a nice picture. It also gives you something to talk about for a few minutes, right? Assuming you do a good job on it. So absolutely correlation. A scatter plot with your line of regression should be in your project. You don't have to directly talk about probability, because probability gets brought up in other ways. So chapters 5, 6, and 7, 5, 6, 7, and 8, you don't directly have to use inside of the project. You can, if it makes sense for you to do that. But the other chapters you probably should be bringing up, okay? Other questions? Brianna, do you have a question? Or? Okay, so what kind of question is it? Is it a proportion question or a mean question? Okay, so then what that confidence interval is going to give you is the likely range that the true proportion falls into. So if you wanted to make some kind of conclusion, then you would just, and you can look back in the assessments and the lessons to see how they kind of use specific wording for the conclusion. But you could say, well, according to this, I think the true proportion of Ventura College students who do whatever falls between this value and this value. So it's giving you a range for that true proportion, and you can make a conclusion that it lies somewhere in that range. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so at this point, I think I'm going to shut down the YouTube stream. And anyone who wants to hang out in Zoom and ask me any kind of questions about what they need to know to wrap up this class, I'm leaving Zoom open until, for another 34 minutes while we have class. come talk to me, and I'll help you figure all that out. Okay, thanks everybody. Also, good work. Right, you've made it to the end of the semester, so good job. Just finish strong, and hopefully everyone can get